Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Paul Barber. Our top stories this hour. Israel tells Palestinians to flee the city of Rafah, where it says face-to-face battles have begun. Scores of people are killed in flash flooding in Afghanistan, with dozens trapped by rising waters. Consumer prices rise in China for the third straight month, signalling the world's second biggest economy is recovering. And millions across northern Europe have been enjoying a spectacular celestial display, the Aurora Borealis, better known as the Northern Lights. Israel has ordered more people to leave the city of Rafah in Gaza ahead of an imminent ground offensive. IDF troops have been intensifying operations around the east of the city, engaging in what they say is face-to-face battles with Hamas. Israel says 300,000 Palestinians have already moved towards what it calls an expanded humanitarian zone on the coast. Meanwhile, the US State Department says that American weapons may have been used by Israel in breach of international humanitarian law. Our correspondent, Martin Lowe, is in Tel Aviv. So, Martin, what has Israel been saying about the situation in Rafah?
Well, yes, we've heard calls from a number of places around the world, principally the United States, asking Israel to slow or stop its attack on Rafah for fear of civilian casualties. But if anything, it appears to be intensifying. The Israeli army has been pushing into Rafah from the east. It quickly took control of the east of the city and the all-important Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt. Once that was secured, it's now started to move forward into central and northern areas. For the second time, Israel has been dropping thousands of leaflets from aircraft warning people, you are in the danger zone, you do need to evacuate because we're about to advance. They've also been sending a similar message by text across all networks. So the Israelis say they're doing everything they can to warn people to move out of the way. But yes, the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, it appears, going further and further towards trying to take control of the whole of the city, which has been their stated aim from the beginning. The IDF assesses that something like 300,000 Palestinian civilians have left the combat zone for safer areas. Clearly, there's still a long way to go, with between 1 million and 1.5 million civilians in the city. But the Israeli War Cabinet has ordered the army to take what it calls a measured offensive. So there's been this is a bit of a to and fro on words. The United States have said if there's an all-out attack on Rafah, they will take action against Israel and they will limit the supply of arms to them. So Israel says it's not doing that. Israel says it's making targeted and strategic advances in a measured fashion. So this is a form of words that's been put forward. But it does seem, from all accounts, that fighting is intensifying. Israel is also now fighting on a second front in the north of Gaza, in a city called Jabalia. The IDF went through there some time ago and cleared out, it said, all the Hamas fighters. It then continued southwards, but it does seem that Hamas has now regrouped in that city, and fighting is taking place there also.
And the US State Department says that it is reasonable to assess that American weapons were being used by Israel, which would be in breach of international humanitarian law, as you said. Has Israel responded to that yet?
Yes, Israel hasn't given an official comment, but there has been a statement by Ophir Falk, who's an advisor to Prime Minister Netanyahu, simply reiterating, really. He says that Israel does act in accordance with international law and is taking extensive steps to minimize civilian casualties. And he points to the fact that they are, for the second time, sending leaflets and text messages to people to warn them of an impending attack. Israel also says, look at the State Department report, and you'll see that they credit Israel. They credit us with giving credible and reliable assurances that we're staying within the boundaries of international law. Also, the report confirms something that Israel has long said, that Hamas is hiding behind civilians and using them as human shields. Prime Minister Netanyahu gave an extensive interview on television. He said Israel so far has killed 14,000 14,000 Hamas terrorists, in his words. But he admits that they've also killed 16,000 civilians. So that's more civilians have died than Hamas fighters. And that's the reason there is so much concern over what's happening and the intensity of the fighting in Rafah. But again, Netanyahu says for us, every civilian casualty is a tragedy. But he says for Hamas, it's a strategy.
Martin Lowe in Tel Aviv, thank you so much. Our correspondent Akram Al-Satari has been reporting for us daily from Rafah, but has now moved to Deir al-Balah in central Gaza.
Well, on our way to this area, I have seen countless number of vehicles taking people and moving them outside of Rafah. I've seen countless numbers of individuals walking. I have been seeing disabled people on wheelchairs that were pulled by their relatives who could not otherwise help them. I have seen whole families waiting in very long line, countless number of people, cars, vehicles, animal-pulled cars waiting to leave Rafah and are already leaving Rafah. People who have been displaced for the 7th time now, according to the UN, and people who have to leave now for the 8th time, people who had to leave their homes, along with the families that they're hosting, that they are IDPs, people who have to go to exactly nowhere. Nowhere in the sense that they don't know where to go, even if they're moving to Khan Yunis. The whole area, around 75% of Khan Yunis, is totally destroyed. If they go to Gaza Central area is one of the areas that were prescribed as a dangerous area by the Israeli occupation. If they go to stay in Rafah in the coastal area, it is an area that was described by the Israeli occupation as a battlefield. The issue is not about a strategic move that is being made by the Israeli occupation to push further inside Rafah. It's more of displacing more people, terrifying more people, and using that displacement and terror as a card in the negotiation that are comprehensively taking place now in Rafah. People who are moving are not seeing any Israeli troops. They are seeing the bombardment that has been targeting different places in all different parts of Rafah. But the Israeli troops that are still fighting in Ashoka area. Ashoka area is in the very east of Rafah, an area that was attacked by the Israeli occupation forces, and the fighting is still there. And we have seen some footage that was released by Hamas military wing showing that they have not advanced further into the city. The strategy is to displace people. The strategy is to target places. The strategy is to keep Palestinians fearful and confused for the sake of making some political gain out of that during the negotiation. This is something that I have seen, something that wrenched the hearts of the people. You see children not knowing where to go, their families not knowing how to secure them, a suffering that has been enveloping all aspects of the life of the people in Gaza.
So let's talk a bit more about the human suffering. The United Nations saying that its agencies will run out of food to distribute in southern Gaza today, Saturday. Oxfam also saying that the human cost of the Rafah offensive will be unconscionable. What is the latest?
The latest is the Rafah crossing closed now for the 5th day, almost the 6th day. The Kerem Shalom is also closed. No movement allowed into that area. The Israeli occupation forces are actively working in that area. They have been leveling the agricultural land, and they have also banning the entry of the life-saving humanitarian need, not only for the UNRWA, but also for the World Food Programme, or for many other international organizations that have been securing and coordinating the flow of the humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip. The issue that is resulting also is a very critical issue, which is the targeting of the food basket of the Gaza Strip. offensive. Now with 26.6% of the Rafah area being an agricultural land, Palestinians are deprived technically from the food that they have been seeing for the last times. Even when there was a problem with the flow of the humanitarian aid, Palestinians were taking some vegetables from the market, from the local market that are cultivated by the farmers. Now farmers are asked to leave, and 2/3 of Rafah area is now evacuated by the Israeli occupation. Most of that area is an agricultural land. So it's a compounded misery, it's a compounded blockade, and the Palestinians are the ones who are bearing the brunt of that and who are expected to starve more and fear more and face all of that alone.
Our correspondent Akram Al-Satri there. Protests against the conflict in Gaza continue to escalate across Europe. More student demonstrations have taken place in the Netherlands, Germany, France and Spain, with some leading to clashes and arrests. Our correspondent Ken Brown reports from Madrid.
3,000 to 4,000 people on the streets of Madrid as pro-Palestinian groups have come together to protest against the Israeli offensive. Camps have popped up at the universities around Spain, like this one at the Complutense University of Madrid, amplifying and inspiring similar protests in Valencia, Barcelona, Alicante and beyond. Students call for an end to the conflict and for Spain to stop buying and selling arms to Israel. Some 2,000 academics have openly supported their students, and the police response has been muted so far in Madrid.
We're all in solidarity with each other, even though we have different situations in each of our protests. But basically, we're all having the same demands, and all of us are protesting because of the same thing, which is basically the rights of the Palestinian people.
Palestinian cause is very important, and we have to defend the right of the Palestinian people to exist.
Elsewhere, things have not been so calm. At the University of Amsterdam, the police stormed a camp at 4 a.m., arresting around 125 activists, also using heavy machinery to break up one camp. The protests come as Israel signals a major expansion of its military operations into the city of Rafah in southern Gaza. Over 35,000 Palestinian people are reported to have lost their lives in this Israeli offensive, which has caused a humanitarian crisis. The World Food Programme says that 1.1 million people in Gaza are suffering catastrophic levels of hunger. Politically, Spain Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez is advocating for European countries to recognize a Palestinian state. Countries like Ireland, Denmark and Slovenia are already on board, along with a handful of others. They are discussing May 21st as a potential date for that declaration. But for the people here on the streets of Madrid and in the campuses around the country, more needs to be done. Ken Brown, CGTN, Madrid.
The situation in Gaza has also sparked protests at the Eurovision Song Contest in the Swedish city of Malmö. Security is tight ahead of the final in just a few hours' time, amid opposition to the inclusion of Israeli singer Eden Golan. More than 10,000 pro-Palestinian demonstrators rallied during her semi-final performance earlier this week. Another large protest is expected on Saturday evening. And this is CGTN still ahead. Consumer prices rise again in China. We'll be discussing what it means for the economy next.
This week on Razor, can precision fishing preserve biodiversity in our oceans?
There's a lot of things can happen between the point we've dropped the net in and we take it out, and if we want to fish more precisely and catch more of the right fish and less of the wrong fish and have less of an impact on the environment, we've got to understand what we're doing.
Welcome back. A reminder of our headlines. Israel tells Palestinians to flee the city of Rafah, where it says face-to-face battles have begun. Fears over the deepening humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Aid remains stuck at the border, and the UN warns that today it will run out of food to distribute. Prices in China have risen slightly for the third straight month, a sign of growing consumer confidence. The cost of goods was 0.3% higher in April compared to a year earlier. Producer prices continued to decline, further signalling a recovery. It follows better than expected import data on the back of a string of policy support measures. Well, Mark Ostwald is Chief Economist and Global Strategist at ADM Investor Services International.
It is a slight rise. The major upward pressure is still coming from things like travel services, but there's a big drag still coming from food, which was down 2.7 year on year. Services prices, core CPI around 0.9. That is an improvement, but it is very, very marginal. And the concern is really more with the producer prices, because that came, as much as it's risen to -2.5 and -2.8, the base effects from last year should actually see it being boosted to hopefully positive territory by June, given that we got to a low point of -5.4 a year ago. So it really still shows to me that demand is still is pretty soggy. And you also saw this in the consumer lending data. New yuan loans up 9.6 year on year, but coming in below expectations, and aggregate social financing also, whereby if you break it out, you can see that the consumer demand for credit is really dropping off quite substantially from its previous peak, and that's mostly related to the housing market.
OK, well, maybe let's touch on the producer prices in just a moment. Turning back to consumer prices and consumer confidence, how important is that for the economy?
I think it's very important. There needs to be more confidence that the housing market has reached the trough and is turning around. And at that point, you will start to see the demand for lending, above all mortgages, start to improve. It's not a question of interest rates, though. It is a question of a sense amongst consumers and indeed amongst businesses that both residential and commercial real estate, the problems there for the developers are being resolved, even if it's going to take some time. And I don't think that confidence is quite there yet.
And as you said, producer prices, they dropped 2.5% in April from a year earlier, less of a slide than a month before, but it's still a decline. However, there is concern, isn't there? Soggy demand. What else does that figure tell us?
Well, to me, in part, it also reflects the weakness that we've had in iron ore and steel prices, which again plays back into the whole property sector. There are other parts of it which are quite strong in terms of anything related to the energy transition and to high tech. And we should hopefully in coming months, given the relative shortage that there is there in the copper market, see a boost coming from anything which is related to high tech, to the energy transition for the primary metals and electric vehicles. So that should start to improve, but it's still overall it still suggests that there needs to be more done, and it needs to be far more targeted probably than wholesale. In other words, a cut in interest rates at this week's medium-term lending facility monthly operation is probably not going to change much. It really needs to, this whole issue of ring fencing new property development so people feel confident that they They are not going to suddenly find that the development is going to be stopped because the developer is in trouble. Really needs to get more traction.
Mark Ostwald there. Well, President Xi Jinping is now back in China following his trip to Europe, which ended in Hungary. CGTN's Juliet Mann spoke to the former Hungarian ambassador to Beijing and asked him about the friendship between the two nations.
I'd like to mention that this year, especially here in Hungarian-Chinese relations, we celebrate the anniversary of the 75th anniversary of establishing diplomatic relations between the two countries. And while talking to President Xi, Prime Minister Orban mentioned that these 75 years have been of continuous friendship. President Xi also talked about the friendship between China and Hungary, and he mentioned that right now, our relations have reached the highest level of their history. So the two sides agreed during the visit and signed a declaration on that they will raise the level of cooperation to the level of strategic partnership. It means, I think, that the all-field cooperation, all-side cooperation between the two countries will continue. The principles, what we have been developing in our relations and pursuing in our relations, will be still on. Principles which are important for both sides. This is mutual respect and benefits, respect for each other, choice for road and development. As a conclusion, I can say that relations will enter into a new phase, into the continuous development and enlargement of the relations.
At least 151 people have died in northern Afghanistan following flash flooding. Heavy rain swept through villages in Baghlan province, destroying homes and leaving many people stranded. The country has been hit by unusually heavy rainfall in the past few weeks, with dozens killed in the west of the country last month. People across northern Europe have been enjoying a spectacular celestial display, the Aurora Borealis, known as the Northern Lights. The phenomenon is usually only visible near the Earth's polar regions. It was caused by the most powerful solar storm in more than 2 decades, with scientists warning of possible disruption to satellites and power grids. Well, let's get some more analysis about what's going on with one of those scientists, Matthew Owens, Professor of Space Physics at the Meteorology Department at the University of Reading here in the UK. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. This was a historic geomagnetic storm with large solar flares. It might be very beautiful to look at, but I was just listing some of those effects. You know, satellites being affected and power grids. Should we be concerned about this?
I mean, we are concerned about this, and that's why we have routine forecasting and liaison with the interested parties, you know, power companies, satellite operators, to try and minimise the risks. We have seen a few effects from this most recent storm. You know, we've seen the Starlink satellites have been struggling a little bit. There will have been extra stress on the power grid, but there haven't been any catastrophic failures. So that's great. You know, the infrastructure is resilient and built to withstand these things.
Well, that's reassuring to hear, certainly. I remember this happening last year where we could see the Northern Lights in places as far south as Sussex, parts of the UK and other parts of Europe. I don't remember this happening before, though, where this could be seen so far south. I mean, how rare is this?
Yeah, it is pretty rare. I mean, southern Florida got pretty good auroral displays, and Italy and south of France, you know, even in Reading, actually, we went out and you expect to look north and see a bit of a green glow on the horizon, but actually it was just everywhere all around us. You know, you see aurora to the south, you go home and open your cupboard and there's aurora there too. You know, it was just amazing. And it is rare, like you say. I think what's really rare is the confluence of having a big 1 in 20, 1 in 30 year solar storm and clear skies. That's really helped.
And do we know why this is happening? Why there are these solar storms that are so powerful?
Yeah, I mean, these eruptions from the sun are commonplace. They happen almost every day. It's rare, Earth needs to be in the firing line for it to have an effect and generate aurora. It just so happens that there was a absolutely huge sunspot pointed right at Earth a few days ago. You could go out, and if you've got eclipse goggles, you can see it with your naked eye. It's that big. And it just happened to fire 6 or 7 or 8 or maybe 9 eruptions at us, one after the other. And they all barreled together in interplanetary space. It was a complete mess between the sun and the Earth. And they're slowly washing over us now.
OK, and just finally, very briefly, those of us who missed it last night, including me, I was tucked up in bed, even though apparently it could be seen in London. Is it going to happen again tonight? Where can people see it?
Well, there are another couple of eruptions that we're predicting will arrive sometime in the early hours. I suspect it might be after most of our bedtimes in the UK. But the uncertainty in when these particular eruptions will arrive is big, because there's just been so much going on. The whole system is a bit of a mess. So we might get lucky, but I suspect we've seen the best of it.
Oh dear. All right, well, I'll keep my fingers crossed. Fascinating stuff. Thank you so much, Professor Matthew Owens from the University of Reading. Much appreciated. The French footballer Kylian Mbappe is to leave Paris Saint-Germain at the end of the season. Mbappe, who has scored a record 255 goals during 7 years at the club, will play his final home game against Toulouse on Sunday. He's expected to complete a long-awaited deal to join Real Madrid. $33.5 billion. That's how much Americans are expected to spend on Mother's Day this year. That's according to a survey by the National Retail Federation. It's below last year's record sum, suggesting that people are still grappling with persistent inflation. Our correspondent Benji Hire reports.
Flowers blooming, business booming. This is Caruso Florist in Washington, D.C., a fourth-generation family-run shop that's been a feature of the nation's capital for more than 100 years. Customers used to queue out the door here. Footfall drove revenue. But times have changed. Now the orders come in by phone or online. Demand here peaks on 2 main occasions, Valentine's Day and Mother's Day.
People love flowers, and any mother or wife or man or woman will love to get flowers any time of the year, so it's always special on Mother's Day, especially when they know their children thinking about them.
Michael and his team say they'll go through 350,000 stems of flowers to meet this weekend's orders. No surprise, flowers are the most common gift choice on Mother's Day. But they're among the cheapest. A National Retail Federation survey shows around 84% of adults plan to celebrate Mother's Day this year, and on average, they're projected to spend more than $250 per person. That figure's even higher for people between the ages of 35 and 44. Jewellery and other accessories account for most of that expenditure. Industry experts suggest the valued presents are personal.
I think it's important to think about who your mom is and what she might like. So, for instance, if she does yoga, a yoga mat from Lululemon is a great idea. If she is headed to the beach this summer or likes to be outside, maybe a beach bag from Tommy Bahama. And of course, all moms like to be spoiled, so something like she can have a spa day at home with beauty items from Nordstrom.
With that, retailers can expect a consumer spending mini-boom in May, a multi-billion-dollar bonanza that'll paint a rosy picture for mum and for the US economy. Benji Hire, CGTN, Washington.
And our headlines again. Israel tells Palestinians to flee the city of Rafah, where it says face-to-face battles have begun. And consumer prices rise in China for the 3rd straight month, signalling that the world's 2nd biggest economy is recovering. And that is The World Today. Thank you for watching. There's more on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. There's more news coming up at the top of the hour. For now, though, from the London team, it's goodbye.